This happened 3 weeks ago and I'm still processing it. Some background. I'm 34, single, been living in the same town as my family my whole life. My dad, Raphael, is 58, works construction, always been the type who thinks he knows everything. My brother Blake is 31, married with 2 kids, works at the same company as my dad. My aunt Denise is dad's sister, 52, never had kids but always has opinions about everyone else's life. We've got Sunday dinners most weeks, birthday parties, the whole family thing. I've always known I was different from them. They're all about traditional stuff. Get married young, have kids, buy a house, work the same job for 30 years. Me? I went to community college, work in IT support, rent an apartment downtown, not married, no kids yet. I always figured they just didn't understand my choices, but I thought that was normal family stuff, you know? 3 weeks ago, Dad asked me to help clean out the garage for his birthday party. Mom wanted everything organized before relatives came over. I said sure, figured it would take a few hours on Saturday morning. Dad went inside to take a call while I was moving boxes around, and I guess he forgot I was still out there. That's when I heard it. Dad was on speakerphone in the kitchen. Window was open, and his voice carried right to where I was standing. He was talking to Blake, Denise, and my cousin Seth, who lives across town. I stopped moving boxes because something in Dad's tone made me listen. Blake said something about me showing up early, and Dad just laughed. But not a good laugh. He said that worthless son of his would never be a real man. Only good for carrying boxes like cheap labor. I stood there holding this box of Christmas decorations and I couldn't move. Denise chimed in. At least he still thinks we want him around. Her voice had this nasty edge I'd never heard before. Blake snorted and said I show up starving for scraps of love like a dog. Every word hit me, but I kept listening because I had to know how deep this went. Dad's voice got lower and he said he'd told everyone I was their family failure project, the joke that never ends. Seth, who I'd helped move apartments twice in the past year, added that I was 34 and still sweeping like a janitor. They all laughed. My own cousin laughed. I just smiled and kept organizing boxes. Didn't look up, didn't react, just kept working like I hadn't heard anything. When Dad came back out 20 minutes later, I finished up and told him the garage looked great. He actually patted my shoulder and said thanks, like nothing happened. But here's the thing. I wasn't shocked. Part of me had always known they looked down on me. Growing up, every family dinner included comments about when I'd settle down, when I'd get a real job, when I'd stop being such a disappointment. I'd learn to tune it out, make jokes, change the subject. I thought it was just typical family pressure. Hearing them call me their failure project, though, their joke that never ends, that crossed a line I didn't even know existed. And the fact that Seth was in on it, that they'd been discussing me behind my back for who knows how long, planning what to say to me at family events, that made everything clear. I went home and spent the rest of that Saturday thinking, not crying, not calling friends to vent, just thinking about what I'd learned and what I wanted to do about it. Because here's what they don't understand. I've actually been doing pretty well. I make decent money in IT, I've got savings, my own place, my own life. I've been helping them out financially and practically for years because I thought that's what family does. Dad's birthday party was the next Sunday. I showed up with a gift, helped set up tables, talked to relatives, played with Blake's kids. Normal family stuff. But I was watching everyone differently now, listening to their comments with new ears. When Denise made a joke about me being the eternal bachelor, I just smiled. When Blake asked if I was ever going to grow up and buy a house, I laughed along. The whole time I was thinking about what I'd heard in that garage. They think I need them. They think I'm desperate for their approval, showing up like a dog begging for scraps. What they don't realize is that I've been coming to family events because I thought we actually cared about each other. I thought their criticism came from a place of concern, not contempt. That night after the party, I made some decisions. Not angry decisions, not emotional reactions, practical decisions about how I want to spend my time and energy going forward. Because if I'm their failure project, if I'm the joke that never ends, then I need to stop participating in that dynamic. I've been giving this a lot of thought over the past 3 weeks. I've got a plan forming, but I'm taking my time with it. See, they expect me to keep showing up, keep helping out, keep being their reliable disappointment who's always available when they need something. They've gotten comfortable with that arrangement. But I've realized something important. I don't actually need their approval anymore. I stopped needing it somewhere along the way without even noticing. What I thought was family loyalty was really just habit, and habits can be changed. The question now is how I want to handle this going forward. Part of me wants to confront them directly, ask them to explain what I heard. Another part thinks actions speak louder than words. I could just start being less available, let them wonder why I'm not showing up as much. But honestly, I think I'm done with both of those approaches. I'm done with the whole game. I'm 34 years old, I've got my own life, and I don't need to waste energy on people who see me as their pet project to mock behind my back. The weird part is how clear everything feels now. For years, I thought there was something wrong with me, that I needed to try harder to earn their respect. Turns out the problem wasn't that I wasn't good enough, it's that they never saw me as an equal family member in the first place. I was always going to be their project, their disappointment, their cautionary tale. You know what, though? I'm not their project anymore. I'm not their joke. And I'm definitely not going to keep showing up to be their punching bag just because we share DNA. Next week is Blake's daughter's birthday party. They're expecting me to show up with a gift and help with setup like always. I've been thinking about whether to go or not, and honestly, I'm leaning towards staying home. Not to make a point or cause drama, but because I'd rather spend my Saturday doing something that actually makes me happy. The more I think about it, the more I realize how much of my life I've organized around their expectations and opinions. Sunday dinners, birthday parties, helping with moves and babysitting. All of it centered around this idea that family comes first. That I owe them my time and energy just because we're related. But what have I gotten back? Criticism disguised as concern, jokes at my expense, and apparently conversations about what a failure I am when they think I can't hear. That's not family. That's just people who take advantage of the fact that I was raised to put up with their treatment. I'm done putting up with it. Not in an angry, confrontational way. I'm just done. Done pretending their opinions matter. Done organizing my life around their approval. Done being available whenever they need something while accepting crumbs in return. They can keep their Sunday dinners and their family meetings where they discuss my shortcomings. I've got better things to do with my time now, like figuring out what I actually want from life instead of what they think I should want. I'll update if anything interesting develops. Right now, I'm just processing the fact that the family dynamics I thought I understood were completely different from reality. It's actually kind of liberating in a weird way. Turns out I don't need their approval to be happy. I just needed to stop seeking it. Update 1. Well, Blake's daughter's birthday party happened yesterday, and things got way more interesting than I expected. I decided to test something. I didn't show up, not to be petty or dramatic, just to see what would happen if I broke my usual pattern. I sent a text to Blake Saturday morning saying I couldn't make it, had some work stuff to handle, and that I'd drop off a gift card for his daughter later in the week. Simple, polite, no big explanation. My phone started buzzing around 2 p.m. First Blake, then Denise, then Dad, all asking where I was, if everything was okay, saying the party wasn't the same without me. Really interesting choice of words considering what I'd overheard them saying about me just being their reliable joke. Blake called me that evening asking if I was mad about something. I told him no, just busy with some projects. He kept pushing though, asking what projects, saying it was weird that I missed a family party. When I stayed calm and said sometimes work comes first, he got quiet for a second before saying that didn't sound like me. That's when I realized something. They've gotten so used to me dropping everything for family events that my absence felt wrong to them. Not because they missed me as a person, but because I wasn't playing my expected role. The next day, Dad called. He wanted to know if someone had upset me, if I was having money problems, health issues, anything that would explain why I'd missed the party. I found it fascinating that he couldn't accept that I might just have other priorities. When I told him I was fine, just focusing on my own stuff lately, he went quiet. Then he said something that really confirmed what I suspected about how they see me. He told me I shouldn't isolate myself from family, that family should always come first, that I needed their support system. The way he said it made it clear he sees me as someone who depends on them, not someone who chooses to be around them. I told him I appreciated his concern, but I was doing fine on my own. He didn't understand that response at all. There was this long pause before he said he'd talk to me later and hung up. Tuesday afternoon, Denise showed up at my apartment unannounced. She said she was worried about me, that I seemed different lately, that the whole family was concerned I might be going through something. She kept fishing for information about why I'd missed the party and what was going on with me. When I told her I was just reevaluating my priorities, she got defensive fast. She said family should be my top priority, that I'd regret it if I pushed them away, that I needed to think about what really mattered in life. The whole conversation felt like she was reading from a script about how family members are supposed to act. But here's what's really interesting. None of them have asked me directly if I heard something or if someone said something that hurt me. They're all assuming this is about me having some kind of personal crisis, not about them. It's like they can't imagine that I might have discovered something about their actual feelings toward me. I'm starting to understand that they've built this whole narrative where I'm the family member who needs guidance and support, who shows up because I need them emotionally and practically. The idea that I might be choosing to distance myself based on information I have about them doesn't fit their story at all. Yesterday, Blake texted asking if I'm coming to Sunday dinner this week. I told him I'd let him know. He texted back that the family misses me and wants to make sure I'm okay. The family misses me. After calling me worthless and their failure project, they miss me. The thing is, I am okay. Better than okay, actually. I spent last weekend doing things I enjoy instead of sitting through another dinner where they make jokes at my expense while pretending it's loving concern. I worked on a programming project I've been putting off, went hiking on Saturday morning, caught up with some friends from work I hadn't seen in months. It's been refreshing to step back and realize how much mental energy I was putting into managing their expectations and reactions. Energy I can use for other things now, like figuring out what I actually want to do with my life instead of what they think I should be doing. Wednesday evening, Blake showed up at my apartment with Seth. They said they wanted to talk to me about what was happening with the family situation. Blake said everyone was confused by my behavior, that they felt like I was pulling away for no reason. Seth said he'd noticed I hadn't been responding to his texts the way I used to. He was right. After hearing him laugh about me being 34 and sweeping like a janitor, I stopped putting effort into our conversations. When he sends me memes or asks how I'm doing now, I just send back basic responses instead of trying to keep the conversation going. They both kept asking what they'd done wrong, what had changed, why I was acting different. The whole time I'm sitting there thinking about how they'd been in on that phone call, talking about me like I was some kind of family embarrassment they had to manage. I told them that sometimes people grow and change, that I was focusing on different things now. Blake said that sounded like I was going through a phase and that family was permanent. Seth said I shouldn't let whatever was bothering me hurt my relationships with people who cared about me. The conversation went in circles for over an hour. They wanted me to explain what they'd done wrong so they could fix it and everything could go back to normal. But they weren't ready to actually examine how they treated me or think about what they might have said about me when they thought I couldn't hear. Finally, Blake asked me directly if someone in the family had said something to upset me. I looked at both of them and said maybe they should think about conversations they've had recently and whether I might have overheard something I wasn't supposed to. Seth's face changed first. I could see him trying to remember what they'd talked about and when. Blake took longer, but then I saw recognition in his eyes. Neither of them said anything for a long moment. Blake finally asked what I'd heard. I told them I'd heard enough to understand how they really feel about me, that I'd learned I was their failure project, their joke that never ends, worthless and good for nothing but carrying boxes. Seth started to say I'd misunderstood, that they were just venting because they worry about me. Blake jumped in saying they only talk about me because they want what's best for me. They both kept insisting I was taking things out of context. But here's the thing. There is no context where calling someone worthless is okay. There is no context where laughing about someone being desperate for scraps of love is acceptable, and they both knew it because they couldn't look me in the eye while they were making excuses. I told them that I appreciated them coming over to talk, but that I needed some time to think about everything. They left looking uncomfortable, which was a new experience for me. Usually, I'm the one who feels bad after family conversations. This morning, Dad called and said the family wanted to have a serious conversation with me this weekend. He said they were all concerned and wanted to clear the air about whatever was causing problems. He made it sound like some kind of intervention. I told him I'd think about it. Truth is, I'm curious what this conversation will look like. Will they actually address their behavior? Or will they just try to convince me to go back to accepting their treatment without complaint? I've been making some other changes too. Blake asked me to watch his kids this weekend while he and his wife went out, something I used to do regularly without question. I told him I had other plans. He asked what plans, like I needed to justify not being available for babysitting duty. I've also been way less responsive to the family group chat, not ignoring it completely, just not jumping to respond immediately like I used to. It's interesting how much this seems to bother them. Denise actually called to ask if something was wrong with my phone because I hadn't responded to her message about Mom's upcoming birthday planning. The thing is, I'm not trying to hurt them or make them worry. I'm just not prioritizing their needs above my own anymore. And apparently that's such a dramatic change that they think something is seriously wrong with me. They keep asking what they did wrong, but they're not ready to hear the answer. They want me to say it's nothing, that I was just having a bad week, that everything can go back to how it was before. They want to fix this by having me pretend I never heard what they really think of me, but I can't unhear it. And I can't go back to pretending that their criticism comes from love when I know it comes from contempt. I can't sit through another family dinner where they make jokes about my life choices while thinking I'm too pathetic to realize they're mocking me. This weekend's conversation should be revealing. I'm prepared for them to either actually acknowledge what they said and how it affected me, or to double down and try to convince me that I'm being too sensitive. Based on everything so far, I'm expecting the latter. I'll update after I see what they have to say, Right now, I'm just processing how different everything feels when you stop trying to earn approval from people who've already decided you're not worth their respect. Update 2. The family intervention happened, and it was exactly what I expected, but also worse than I thought it would be. They had it all planned out like some kind of coordinated attack. Sunday afternoon, I showed up at Dad's house and found them all waiting for me. Dad, Blake, Denise, Seth, and Mom was there too, but she mostly just sat quietly in the corner. They'd obviously talked about their approach beforehand because everyone had their talking points ready. Dad started by saying they were all concerned about me and wanted to understand what was wrong. He said families go through rough patches, but that communication was important. Very reasonable and caring, except for the fact that they were treating me like I was having some kind of breakdown instead of responding to their actual behavior. Blake jumped in and said I'd been different for weeks, that I wasn't participating in family activities the same way, that I seemed angry about something. When I asked what gave him the impression I was angry, he said I wasn't acting like myself, like my normal self was supposed to be their punching bag who just took whatever they dished out. Denise said she could tell something was bothering me and that bottling things up wasn't healthy. She said whatever was going on, we could work through it as a family. Seth nodded along and said he missed our normal conversations. The whole time they're talking about me like I'm not sitting right there, like I'm a problem that needs to be solved rather than a person who might have legitimate reasons for changing how I interact with them. Finally, Dad asked me directly to tell them what was wrong so they could fix it. That's when I decided to lay it all out there. I told them about what I'd overheard in the garage 3 weeks ago. Every single word. I said I'd heard Dad call me worthless, heard Denise say, "At least I still think they want me around," heard Blake compare me to a dog begging for scraps, heard Seth mock my job and call me a janitor. The reaction was immediate and telling. Blake said I'd misunderstood what I heard. Denise said I was taking things out of context. Seth said they were just venting frustration because they worry about me. Dad said families sometimes say things they don't mean when they're concerned about someone. Not one of them apologized or acknowledged that what they'd said was hurtful. Not one. Instead, they doubled down. Dad said they only talk about me because they want what's best for me. Blake said if I was more open to their advice, they wouldn't have to discuss their concerns with each other. Denise said the real problem was that I was eavesdropping and getting offended by conversations that weren't meant for me to hear. Then it got worse. Dad said maybe this was exactly the kind of oversensitivity they were talking about, that I was proving their point by getting upset instead of listening to their feedback and trying to improve. Blake said I was acting like a victim when they were trying to help me become a better person. Seth said I should focus on the intention behind their words, not the words themselves. Denise said I needed to grow thicker skin if I wanted to be part of a family that cared enough to be honest with me. I sat there listening to all of this and realized something important. They genuinely believe they're the victims here. In their minds, I'm the one causing problems by refusing to accept their treatment. They see my reaction to their cruelty as the real issue, not the cruelty itself. So I asked them a simple question. I said if they really thought I was worthless and a failure, why did they want me around at all? Why invite me to family dinners and birthday parties if I'm such a disappointment? The silence after that question was deafening. Dad finally said that's not what they meant, that I was twisting their words. But Blake actually answered honestly for once. He said they wanted me around because family is family, and that didn't mean they had to pretend I was making good choices. Denise added that they loved me despite my flaws, and that meant sometimes they had to talk about those flaws to figure out how to help me. Seth said they weren't giving up on me even if I was giving up on myself. That's when I understood the whole dynamic. In their minds, I'm their charity case, their project. They keep me around because it makes them feel good about themselves as loving family members, but they don't actually respect me as a person. They love the idea of helping their screwed-up relative, not me as an individual. I told them I didn't need their help or their pity, that I had my own life, my own job, my own apartment, my own friends, that I'd been doing just fine before I found out what they really thought of me. Dad said that was exactly the kind of prideful attitude that kept me from growing. Blake said I was too stubborn to accept guidance from people who knew better. Denise said I was being defensive instead of grateful that they cared enough to stay involved in my life. So I asked another question. I said what exactly they thought I should be grateful for. What had they actually done for me lately besides criticize my choices and mock me behind my back? That's when the conversation got really ugly. Dad started listing all the times they'd included me in family events, all the dinners I'd been invited to, all the birthday parties and holidays. Like being allowed to attend family gatherings was some kind of favor they were doing me. Blake mentioned the times I'd watched his kids, but framed it like he was giving me the opportunity to spend time with family, rather than me doing him a favor. Denise talked about all the advice she'd given me over the years about dating and career stuff. Seth brought up how they'd always been there for me when I needed support. I asked him to give me one specific example of support they'd provided, and he couldn't think of any. None of them could actually point to a time when they'd helped me with anything meaningful. But they could list plenty of times I'd helped them. Moving furniture, babysitting, lending money, fixing computer problems, driving people to appointments. Somehow, in their version of events, me helping them was just what I was supposed to do as the family member who had nothing better going on. I told them I was done with all of it. Done with the family dinners where they made jokes about my life choices. Done with being available whenever they needed something. Done pretending that their constant criticism came from love instead of contempt. Dad said I was making a mistake that I'd regret for the rest of my life. Blake said I was burning bridges over nothing, that families are supposed to be honest with each other. Denise said I was being dramatic, and that I'd come crawling back when I realized how much I needed them. Seth said they weren't giving up on me even if I was giving up on them. That really got to me because it was such a perfect example of how they see everything. Me setting boundaries with people who disrespect me is giving up on them. Me refusing to accept their treatment is the problem, not their behavior. I stood up to leave and Dad asked where I thought I was going. I told him I was going home to my own life that I'd built without their help. Blake said we weren't done talking about this. I said actually, we were completely done talking about it. As I was walking to the door, Mom finally spoke up. She said she hoped I'd reconsider. That family was all anyone really had in the end. I looked at her and said maybe some families, but not this one. The drive home was weird. I kept waiting to feel sad or guilty or like I'd made a huge mistake, but mostly I just felt relieved, like I'd finally stopped carrying a weight I didn't even realize was there. Since then, my phone has been blowing up. Group texts about upcoming family events that I'm not responding to. Individual messages from each of them trying different approaches to get me to come around. Blake sent me a long text about how families fight sometimes, but that doesn't mean you stop being family. Denise left a voicemail saying she understood I was hurt, but that I shouldn't let pride keep me from the people who loved me. Seth texted asking if we could grab coffee and talk things through. Dad called twice, but I didn't pick up. He left a message saying he wanted to explain some things better. That maybe they hadn't communicated their concerns in the best way. The thing is, they still don't get it. They think this is about hurt feelings that will heal over time. They think if they just find the right words or approach, I'll come back and everything will go back to normal. They can't understand that normal was the problem. Yesterday, Blake showed up at my work. Actually came to my office building and asked the receptionist to call me down. He said he wanted to talk without everyone else around, that maybe we could work things out just between us. I told him there was nothing to work out, that I'd heard what he really thought of me, and I was done pretending it didn't matter. He said he never meant to hurt my feelings, that brothers say stupid things sometimes when they're frustrated. But then he started in again about how they were all just trying to help me, how I needed to understand that they criticized me because they wanted me to have a better life. Same script, different location. I told him my life was fine the way it was, and that I didn't need his version of help. He said I was being stubborn, and that I'd regret cutting off my family over this. I said my family cut me off the day they decided I was their failure project instead of their equal. He left looking frustrated. I felt bad for about 5 minutes, then remembered everything they'd said about me and felt fine again. The weird part is how much mental space this has freed up. I didn't realize how much energy I was spending trying to manage their expectations and reactions. How much I was censoring myself around them, trying not to give them more ammunition for their conversations about my shortcomings. Now I come home from work and think about what I want to do with my evening instead of whether I need to call anyone back or show up somewhere or help someone with something. It's been 3 weeks since I've been to a family dinner and I don't miss it at all. I've been thinking about why they treat me this way, and I think it comes down to control and superiority. As long as I'm the family screw-up, they get to feel good about their own choices. As long as I need their guidance and criticism, they get to feel wise and helpful. My independence threatens that dynamic. That's why they can't just let me go. It's not about love or concern. It's about maintaining their roles as the successful family members who generously tolerate their disappointing relative. But I'm not playing that role anymore. I'm done being their project, their cautionary tale, their source of self-righteousness. They can find another family member to look down on. Tomorrow is Mom's birthday, and I'm sure I'll get calls and texts about missing it. I've already decided I'm not going. I'm taking myself out to dinner instead, somewhere I actually want to be with people who actually want me there. I'll update if anything major happens, but honestly, I think the story's pretty much over. They showed me who they really are, and I believed them. Now I'm building a life without them in it. Final update. Well, it's been about 2 months since I overheard that conversation in the garage, and I figured I should wrap this up for everyone who's been following along. A lot has happened, and honestly, I'm in a completely different place now than I was when I first posted. So Mom's birthday came and went. I didn't go, just like I said I wouldn't. Instead, I took myself out to this really nice steakhouse downtown that I'd been wanting to try. Sat at the bar, had an amazing dinner, chatted with the bartender about sports, and genuinely enjoyed myself more than I had at a family gathering in years. My phone was buzzing all night with texts and calls from the family asking where I was, saying mom was disappointed, asking if I was really going to miss her birthday over this. Dad left a voicemail saying they'd save me a piece of cake and that I could still come by later if I changed my mind. The guilt trip was strong, but I reminded myself that they'd had plenty of opportunities to treat me with basic respect and chose not to. Missing one birthday wasn't going to kill anyone, and I wasn't going to pretend nothing had happened just to make them comfortable. The next week, things escalated, though. Blake showed up at my apartment again, this time with Denise. They said they'd been talking and they realized they needed to try a different approach. Blake actually apologized for some of the things he'd said he could see how I might have taken them the wrong way. Denise said she'd been thinking about our conversation and maybe they hadn't been as supportive as they should have been. She said families go through rough patches, but that cutting each other off wasn't the solution. I appreciated that they were at least acknowledging something, but their apologies felt hollow. Blake was sorry I took things the wrong way, not sorry for saying them. Denise thought they hadn't been supportive enough, not that they'd been actively cruel. I told them I appreciated them coming over, but that some things couldn't be fixed with apologies. That calling someone worthless isn't something you accidentally say or something that can be taken the wrong way. It's what you actually think about that person. Blake said he'd been frustrated when he said those things, that it wasn't really how he felt. I asked him to explain the difference between what you say when you're frustrated and what you actually think. He couldn't give me a good answer. Denise kept trying to redirect the conversation back to family being family, about how we needed to work through this together. But I wasn't interested in working through anything with people who fundamentally didn't respect me as a person. They left disappointed, and I haven't heard from them since. Well, except for the group texts about family events that I stopped responding to entirely. But here's where things got really interesting. Last week, my cousin Seth called me, not to apologize or try to get me to come back, but because he needed something. His computer crashed and he lost a bunch of important files, and he wanted to know if I could help him recover them. For context, Seth has asked me to fix his computer problems probably 20 times over the past few years. I've always said yes because that's what family does, right? I've spent countless weekends diagnosing his issues, removing viruses, setting up new systems, explaining how to avoid problems in the future. This time I told him no. I said I wasn't available to help with that kind of thing anymore. He was confused, said it would only take a few hours, that he really needed the help. I told him he'd need to take it to a professional. He got quiet for a minute before saying he understood I was mad at the family but that this was different. This was just helping with a computer. I told him it wasn't different at all, that I'd spent years being available whenever any of them needed something, and in return I got mocked behind my back. Seth said he was sorry about the things that were said, that he didn't really mean them. I told him that was nice, but it didn't change anything. He asked what it would take for me to help him, and I said nothing, that I wasn't negotiating or looking for an apology that would make me available again. I was just done. The desperation in his voice, when he realized I was serious, was something I'd never heard before. He kept trying different approaches, saying it was an emergency, that he had work files he needed, that he didn't have money for a professional right now. None of it worked because I wasn't trying to punish him. I just genuinely didn't care about his problems anymore. That conversation made me realize something important. They'd gotten so used to me being their reliable backup plan that they never bothered to develop other solutions. Seth doesn't know how to maintain his own computer because he's always had me to fix it. Blake doesn't know any other babysitters because I was always available. Denise probably doesn't have anyone else's number to call when she needs help with something. I'd been enabling their helplessness for years by always saying yes, always being available, always putting their needs ahead of my own plans. And they'd repaid that reliability by talking about me like I was pathetic for always being there when they needed me. The irony is pretty incredible when you think about it. They mocked me for being desperate for their approval, while being completely dependent on my willingness to help them. They called me worthless, while relying on me to solve their problems. 2 weeks ago, I ran into Blake at the grocery store. It was the first time I'd seen any of them in person since that conversation at Dad's house. He looked uncomfortable, but came over to talk to me anyway. He asked how I was doing, made small talk about work and the weather. Then he mentioned that his regular babysitter had been unavailable lately and asked if I might be willing to watch the kids sometime soon. Like nothing had happened. Like we'd just had a minor disagreement that was water under the bridge now. I told him no. I wasn't available for babysitting anymore. He asked if that was permanent or if I might reconsider in the future. I said it was permanent. He looked genuinely shocked, like he couldn't process that I might not be available whenever he needed me. He started in on the family speech again about how families help each other and how I was being stubborn. I cut him off and said families also treat each other with basic respect, which his family had failed to do. I wished him luck finding a new sitter and walked away. The look on his face was something I'll remember for a long time. Not angry or hurt, just completely confused. Like he genuinely couldn't understand how we'd gotten to this point or what he'd done wrong. That's when I realized they really don't get it. They think this is about hurt feelings that will heal over time, not about me fundamentally changing how I relate to them. They're waiting for me to get over it and go back to normal, but normal was the problem. Yesterday, Dad called. First time I'd heard from him directly since the intervention. He said he'd been thinking about everything that happened and wanted to have a real conversation, just the two of us. He sounded tired. Older than usual? I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. He said he'd been talking to Mom about the whole situation and that maybe they'd handled things badly. He said he loved me and didn't want to lose me over what he called a misunderstanding. I told him it wasn't a misunderstanding, that I'd heard exactly what they all thought of me and I believed them. He said things get said in families that don't really represent how people feel, that I was being too harsh. But then he said something that really showed me nothing had changed. He said he hoped I'd eventually realize that family was more important than pride, and that when I was ready to apologize for cutting them off, they'd be willing to work things out. Apologize for cutting them off? Like setting boundaries with people who disrespect me was something I should be sorry for. I told him there wouldn't be any apologies from me, and that if he wanted to have a relationship with me going forward, it would have to be based on mutual respect, not family obligation. He said he'd think about it and hung up. Honestly, I doubt I'll hear from him again. None of them are capable of seeing me as an equal who deserves respect. In their minds, I'll always be the family member who needs guidance and criticism, who should be grateful for their attention regardless of how they treat me. But you know what? I'm okay with that. These past 2 months have been the most peaceful I've felt in years. I come home from work and don't have to check my phone for family drama or obligations. I make weekend plans based on what I want to do, not what family events I'm expected to attend. I've been spending more time with friends from work, people who actually seem to enjoy my company. I joined a hiking group that meets on Sundays instead of going to family dinners. I've been working on personal projects that interest me instead of spending my free time helping other people with their problems. The mental space this has freed up is incredible. I didn't realize how much energy I was spending trying to manage their expectations and reactions, how much I was censoring myself around them to avoid giving them more ammunition for their private conversations about my shortcomings. I've also been reflecting on why they treated me that way in the first place. I think it comes down to them needing someone to look down on to feel better about their own choices. As long as I was the family's screw-up, they got to feel successful by comparison. As long as I needed their criticism and guidance, they got to feel wise and important. My independence threatens that whole dynamic. If I'm doing fine on my own, if I'm happy with my choices, if I don't need their approval or help, then what role do they play in my life? They can't handle the idea that they might not be necessary. That's why they keep trying to pull me back in with guilt and obligation. Not because they miss me as a person, but because they miss their roles as the successful family members who generously tolerate their disappointing relative. But I'm not playing that game anymore. I'm not their project, their cautionary tale, or their source of self-righteousness. I'm just a guy living his own life on his own terms. And that's exactly how I want it. Looking back at that conversation in the garage, I'm almost grateful I overheard it. Not because it felt good to learn what they really thought, but because it forced me to examine relationships I'd been accepting without question. It made me realize that family isn't automatically sacred if those family members don't treat you with basic human decency. Some of you might think I'm being too harsh, that I should give them another chance or try to work things out. But I spent 34 years trying to earn their respect and approval, and all I got in return was mockery and contempt. I'm done trying to fix relationships with people who see me as fundamentally broken. This is probably my last update, unless something major happens. I've said what I needed to say, and I'm ready to move on with my life. Thanks to everyone who followed along and offered support in the comments. It helped more than you know. To anyone dealing with similar family dynamics, you don't owe toxic people your time and energy just because you share DNA. You deserve to be treated with respect, and if your family can't provide that, you have every right to build a life without them in it. It's scary at first, but it's also incredibly freeing. Turns out you can be happy without the approval of people who never really approved of you anyway.